Okay, so a very quick video, hopefully to help you how to analyze the idea that countries should specialize and trade even if they don't have an absolute advantage in one of the goods. And this is what you'd have to do in any sort of essay which says, what's the benefits of opening up a country to trade, reducing tariffs, etc. Any question like that, this is the basic analysis. And so hopefully I'm just going to show you it in points 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and it'll give you a good chain of reasoning. So the first thing that you have to say is that let's assume one country has got an absolute advantage in both goods, and in this case it's Canada. Okay, and so you would be saying they can produce more of both goods compared to the UK. They've got this absolute advantage. They're more efficient in both goods. Now, you have to show then the PPF of the United Kingdom. And they do that by starting at a point here. So they are not as efficient at cars as Canada are. And they are really, really much, much less efficient at grain. Okay, and so you can then state that the UK cannot produce as many of either goods, right? They're less efficient at both goods. So Canada's got an absolute advantage in both, but the question is, should we still specialize and trade? Are we still going to get the benefits from that? And this is what you'd have to do. So you then say point 2, even though one Canada, has got a absolute advantage, both countries are going to have a comparative advantage in one of the goods. Now, you can almost state this, but it's worth you being able to understand this. You can see in this example that Canada is so much better at grain, and it's only a little bit better at cars. So Canada is going to have a comparative advantage in grain, Britain, UK, in cars. But how you have to say it is you have to say that Canada's got a comparative advantage in grain because the production of this grain comes with a lower opportunity cost compared to the UK. And just to explain that to you, just take any type number of grain here. Let's say put a line down here, and let's say both countries are producing this amount of grain. Now, the opportunity cost in Canada of producing more is just going to be a few cars given up here. So if Canada moves from this much grain to this much grain, they're going to give a small amount of cars given up. Whereas in the UK, if they were producing this much grain, to get more grain, moving up here, can you see they're going to give up a lot more cars. So the opportunity cost of grain is lower in Canada. Exactly the same with cars. Take any number of cars being produced. Here's cars, here's the number of cars, same number of cars. In Canada, if they wanted more cars, then let's say they move from here to here, they're giving up a huge amount of grain because they're really efficient at grain. Whereas in the UK, they're going to have a much lower opportunity cost. They don't have to give up much grain in order to get the same number of cars. You don't need to show that on the diagram, but hopefully that explains the idea behind comparative advantage. But you do need to use the concept of lower opportunity cost. Now, what's going to happen? Well, Canada is therefore going to specialize in grain, and you put in a nice specialization point here. UK is going to specialize in cars, and you put in a specialization point here. That's your third point. Your fourth point is then going to say, so what do they do? Can they, if they specialize, they don't want just cars in the UK and grain. I mean, the Canadians have got to get around as well, so they need some cars. So without trade, the PPF of both countries is actually what they can consume. You can only consume what you are producing. So if, let's say, the UK wanted to give up some cars to get some grain, without trade, giving up that number of cars only gets them that amount of grain. So they'll only benefit from trade if they give them up and they get more. And so it's really worthwhile putting these trading ratios in. So this trading ratio really has to be to the right of this pink PPF. And This one, you can't go too wild and put it out here, because that ratio there, you're going to slip across here and you're going to do the same slope here, and it's got to be beyond that one. But in your analysis, you have to draw some arrows like this, I think. So in other words, you are saying in the analysis, look, the UK is going to give up that number of cars. If they weren't trading, they would get that amount of grain. If they were able to trade at this ratio, they'd get more grain. And that difference between those 2 points is the benefit of trading. Okay, you take that line across here, and here we go. You say Canada has got all this grain here, and it gives up some. Internally, without trade, it would only gain that number of cars, but with trade, it would gain more cars from the UK than it could do internally. So there's a benefit to Canada, and there's a benefit to the UK. And so your fifth point is really worth saying. Both countries benefit. They can consume beyond their PPF, and then say, of course, the PPF is the consumption possibility without trade. So with trade, the consumers in this country are much better off. They get more goods for any number of cars that they're producing. And in Canada, again, there's a higher consumption possibility than the consumption possibility without trade. So the PPF is a consumption possibility without trade. In other words, you can only consume what you produce. Hopefully that helps to write a clear analysis.